Welcome to this Haftarah Mikeitz. We are in 1 Kings chapter 3, starting with verse 15, all the way to chapter 4, verse 1. Now, this Haftarah takes place at the very beginning of the reign of Solomon. I think it was said that he was around 20 at the time. He hasn't yet built the temple in Jerusalem. Now, once the temple was built, Jerusalem, as you know, becomes the place that God places his name, and it's at that point that all other places of worship would be forbidden. So in this Haftarah, we find that Solomon is at what's called the high place of Gibeon. Now, Gibeon is where the tabernacle stood during the days of David, but the Ark of the Covenant is at this point in Jerusalem in a sacred tent. There's not any centralized worship place at this particular point because of the destruction of the sanctuary that was at Shiloh. But even still, I'm a little unsure whether, because it says that Solomon is sacrificing at the high place of Gibeon. And I don't know whether this high place is kosher or not for him to be sacrificing at. I just don't know. If you know the answer, I would love to hear it. You can put it in the course comments. And in chapter 3, verse 3, so it's a little bit before we get to come to the Haftarah, it says that Solomon loved God and he walked in his commandments, except that he made sacrifices at the high places. So that's what makes me wonder if there was something unkosher going on here. But nevertheless, after he sacrificed at Gibeon, God comes to him in a dream, and he promises to give him a wise and a perceptive heart, which is what Solomon asked for. Now, I need to interject just a little tiny bit of ancient Near East tidbit here. I can't help it. I don't know about you, but I used to think that Solomon asking God for wisdom was like a really special thing for him to do, and that it was so different that it kind of set him apart as a man of God. But what I later learned was that it actually was not unusual in the ancient Near East for a king to pray to his deity for wisdom in ruling his kingdom. So in ancient Egypt, in the area of Mesopotamia, in Israel, the king was the representative of the deity on earth. Now, in ancient Egypt, the king was also said to be actually a deity, but nevertheless, a representative of the deity on earth, right? The kings in this time period would rule by divine decree, and they handed out justice by divine wisdom that they had to ask for and receive from the God. So they were a representative of the God's wisdom, right? So Solomon was not any different here from any of the other ancient Near East kings when he asked God for divine wisdom to rule the kingdom. But it does kind of make me think about, like, what's the practical lesson with this, right? And I got to thinking about, how would I respond to God if he were to ask me in a dream, hey, Gail, ask me whatever you want from me. And so I thought this might be something good for you to think about too, and maybe journal what you would ask him for. And then write also why that's what you would ask him for. So what is it and why that? Think about these kinds of things. Think about what are the religious cultural things that we have today that might influence what we want to ask for. Would those cultural things influence and play into your decision? Why or why not? Then I wonder if the story of Solomon would influence your answer. Well, gee, Solomon asked for wisdom, so maybe that's what I need to ask for. And then I wonder if, the fable of the genie in the bottle, would that influence you? Because that's kind of where my mind goes when I think about God saying, hey, anything you want, I don't know. And then I wonder, ask yourself, would your answer, what you're asking for, would that be kind of short-sighted? Like, would you be asking for your needs for today, for this moment, which isn't a bad thing at all, or would you be thinking more generational, more long-term in what it is that you're asking God to give you? And then would you believe that there must be a right and a wrong answer? That's kind of how I tend to be a black and white thinker. And that's one of the things when I was thinking about this, doing this exercise myself, I was thinking, well, I better answer right because there's probably a wrong answer. And then it got me to thinking, well, do I believe God would actually grant it to me? Those are really deep thoughts, right? So take your time and to process this, asking God to help you. And honestly, I'm still processing my thoughts about all of these questions. If you would like to share, I would love to hear what you come up with. Our Haftarah this week gives us the very first recorded court case that Solomon ever presided over, demonstrating that divine wisdom that he asked for and God gave. The Haftarah starts out with telling us, then Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Then Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Well, what's really interesting, and this is an identical phrase in the Torah portion, and that's what ties these two together. Because in the Torah portion, Pharaoh has a prophetic dream, and it says, then Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Now, God gives Solomon a wise and perceptive heart. And that phrase, interestingly, also shows up in the Torah portion. And it says, now let Pharaoh see to finding a man who's perceptive and wise and place him over the land of Egypt. It's talking about Joseph. So that twin phrase there. Now, both Joseph and Solomon, they created situations where they put like the defendants on the spot in pretty serious ways. And they did it in order to bring the defenses down of them so true feelings could be revealed. Now, with Joseph, he arranged the situation where it looked like Benjamin had stolen those things, right? And his life was now in danger. And through all of this suffering, Joseph's brothers were able to realize their offense against Joseph, and they were able to express remorse. They were able to take responsibility for Benjamin and put themselves in danger to protect him, something they weren't capable of doing for Joseph. They also, because of this, were able to express concern about how their father would react if something happened to Benjamin like it did to Joseph. So Joseph was able to kind of like shock them enough for them to reveal their truth. And that's similar with Solomon. He was able to bring to light the truth of who really was the mother of the living child in question. Now, his shocking thing, of course, was to offer to cut the child in two. Okay, so you know the story. 2 women, 1 dead baby, 1 living baby. And both women are claiming that the living child was hers. Now, the women are referred to as Isha Zonos. Isha means woman, as we know. Zonos actually has 3 very different possible interpretations. The literal interpretation is the most common one, and that means harlot or prostitute. But another interpretation comes from rendering this word, the word zonah, as deriving from the word mazon, which means food. So in this interpretation, zonos becomes innkeeper, one who provides food. And a lot of the rabbis actually say that that's the proper interpretation, and they also say Rahab was an innkeeper because of this interpretation. The third interpretation is that the two women were actually spirits just appearing as women. They were coming to test the wisdom of Solomon in judging this dispute. So I'm just giving you the three interpretations, and I'm not going to say which, One thing I do want to bring up, though, is did you happen to catch why this particular law case was such a tough case? Well, in verse 18 of chapter 3, it says that the two women were the only ones in the house. So why is this important to tell us this in the text? What should we be thinking about right now? Well, according to Torah, every matter of law is established by what? Do you remember? By 2 or 3 witnesses, right? So without any witnesses in the house, this case cannot be solved as it stands. But Solomon received a wise and a discerning heart, right? I have a question for you. Have you ever given any thought in this account of the two mothers whether they represent a parable with like a deeper meaning? I didn't think to see it this way. If it weren't for Bill Bullock's commentary, the Biblical Lifestyle Center. I'm sorry, I can't quite remember the name of it. Bill Bullock has been my Torah teacher for many, many, many years, and he has a wonderful commentary on the Torah portions every week, and he does a little something on the Haftarahs, and I was reading that, and he asked this series of questions. And one of the question was, he doesn't answer it, but he says, I wonder if the women are like prophetic types. And that really got me to thinking about that. So I Googled, I tried to see in all my resources if there was anything on this, looking at these women as some kind of a prophetic type of something. And my theory is that the two women represent the two nations of Judah and Israel. Because remember, at this time, the 12 tribes are united under David and Solomon, right? But it's during Solomon's son's reign that the king is divided into Judah and Israel. And we've been talking about that in some of the other Haftarahs, right? So is that what they're representing? And then there's the question of the sons. The dead son, the living son, right? What do they represent? The sword, I was thinking the sword of the spirit of Torah. But what do these elements in this story represent? And I was pondering this, and I was asking God to answer me, help me to track down, at least track down maybe what other people have been thinking about this, right? And the coolest thing happened that I want to share with you. Now, I think I've said this before, that I create the video content a few weeks ahead of time. So when I'm creating the content and making the video, you won't see it until it comes up on the cycle, right? And it's usually I'm like a couple of weeks ahead. I don't like to get too far ahead, but well, this week that I've been working on this particular Haftarah, this is the week that Dina Dye spoke about her upcoming course on the Temple series. Now, I don't know if by the time you watch this, if her series has started or not, but hopefully you've heard about it. Well, in this particular Tuesday talk with Brenda, that she was talking about her upcoming course, and she just randomly mentioned Solomon and this case study with the two mothers, and she also concluded that the two mothers may in fact represent the northern and the southern tribes. And she reminded us, and certainly reminded me, that the themes of kingdom, kingship, the perpetuation of the kingdom, heirs, these are huge themes throughout the Bible. And she said that she wasn't 100% sure if that's what the two women represented. And she also said she tried to look it up too and couldn't find anyone had written anything on it. And she said that it's in her newest book, Temple According to Noah. And she said that she went ahead and included that in her book because she says that she doesn't know it all, right? She's brilliant and she knows so much, but she doesn't know it all. And sometimes she'll present things that haven't been offered by anyone else before, just as a way to kind of get us to think deeply about an issue that we wouldn't have thought about before. I thought that was really cool. So what I learned from that is that we should always look for a deeper meaning, an additional meaning in whatever passages that we're studying, right? Like beyond the commentaries, beyond what I present in the course, what someone else does in their course. And we should remember to look for patterns like that, like the pattern of house building and kingdom building and an heir to the kingdom, right? And I think that when we approach a text with this kind of wonderment, what else could it mean? Looking for deeper meaning, looking for additional meanings. I think that that's when we'll really get a sense of the awesomeness and the depth of this redemptive plan of God's that He has for His creation. We just have no idea how amazing His plan is. And when we look at stories like this with Solomon, yes, it's a story demonstrating his divine wisdom, but what else is it? What are the deeper meanings? So it's really cool. You know, God says to Solomon, "Ask, what shall I give you?" We say it was wisdom, but in Hebrew it actually says shama lev, a shamaing heart. A heart that is quick to listen and then to adjust itself to do what was said to do or not do what was said not to do, right? Now, Solomon did end up, that we read in some of the other writings, he did end up listening to or shemaing the voices of his pagan wives instead of God. So the lesson, I think, would be that we should be careful for what we ask for. Solomon, in a great way, asks to discern between Tov and Ra, between good and evil, on behalf of the people as he rules them. But in the end, he kind of becomes the new Pharaoh, because he actually enslaves the very people that God had set free. So we have to be careful what we ask for if we're asking to be able to us declare what is good and what is bad. Because that's what Adam and Eve got, that ability, and it didn't go well for them, right? So we need to remember to ask for discernment to know what God has already said is good and evil, which is very, very different from us having the ability to determine these things. Do you see the difference? I don't think humans are meant to know everything. And because we don't know everything, we can't be the ones to discern or determine what's good or bad, tov or ra. We have to look to God and see what He has already declared. But that temptation is always going to be there for us. So I think we need stories in Scripture, which God does give us, about what happens when we're given this kind of knowledge, right? So Solomon is called the wisest man. What is the wisest thing that anyone can do? That's to obey God, right? So was Solomon really the wisest man that ever lived? No. You know who it is. Yeshua, our Messiah. Because unlike all the others, he obeyed the Father constantly. He looked to see what God the Father had already determined to be. He didn't try to make up his own determination of what was good or bad. He looked to the Father. May we be like Yeshua. I will see you in the next Haftarah lesson.